The words carried like a spark through the gathered soldiers. A murmur spread. Humans were not supposed to be heroes in Velari eyes. They were outsiders, often feared, often dismissed. And yet, here was one who had done what none of them could. He had brought the princess back alive. Ethan looked down, trying to hide the swelling pride in his chest. He had not done it for recognition. He had done it because it was the right thing. Because someone had to. And now, in front of the entire royal contingent, he realized that he had changed everything. The princess's hands found his again, gripping tightly. "You don't have to leave," she said, her voice trembling. I don't want you to." Ethan swallowed. He had not expected her to speak like that, not here, not now. But the sincerity in her voice, the trust she placed in him, anchored him. He nodded slightly. "I'm not going anywhere," he said simply. The soldiers began to move around them, forming a path toward the ships. They were silent, but their eyes followed Ethan. Some were suspicious. Others were in awe, but all were aware of the miracle they had witnessed. A human had risked everything for a Velari. A human had crossed the lines that centuries of fear and mistrust had drawn. As they walked toward the largest ship, Lysiara leaned closer to Ethan. "I've never met a human like you," she whispered. "You're different." Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe we're not all bad," he said. His own voice surprised him with its softness. "Some of us just care." They reached the ship's ramp, and the guards motioned them inside. Ethan helped Lysiara onto the floor of the vessel, easing her onto a soft, glowing seat. Her eyes flicked up at him. "Will you come with me?" He hesitated. Everything in him screamed to rest, to let someone else take over. But when he looked into her silver eyes, he knew he could not. He had promised. And promises were not for breaking. "I will," he said. And that was enough. The doors of the ship closed behind them, and the engines hummed to life. Outside, the battlefield lay in silence, the smoke beginning to drift away with the wind. Inside, Lysiara turned to Ethan. Her hands rested on his arm, her eyes full of gratitude and something deeper: trust, hope, and perhaps the first spark of admiration. Ethan glanced around. The ship was quiet now, filled with soldiers giving them space, giving them respect. He felt something strange: acceptance. He had crossed from being an outsider to being someone indispensable. Someone worth noticing. The princess's voice broke his thoughts. "Thank you," she said softly, almost shyly. "For everything." Ethan shook his head. "You don't need to thank me. I just did what anyone would have." "No," she said firmly, her small hand on his chest. "Not anyone." She trailed off, unsure. Her gaze softened, and in that moment, Ethan understood the unspoken truth. She trusted him with her life. And that trust was everything. The ship lifted off the ground, carrying them toward the Velari capital. Outside the window, the burning valley became smaller, the smoke fading. Inside, Ethan and Lysiara sat side by side. The silence between them full of unspoken words, full of emotion. Full of the promise that their lives would never be the same again. For the first time in days, Ethan allowed himself to breathe. The battle was over. The princess was safe, and he was just beginning to understand how far this journey would take him. The palace doors opened slowly, revealing a hall of light and crystal. Ethan stepped inside, still carrying the weight of exhaustion, bruises, and dirt from the battlefield. Princess Lysiara walked beside him, her small hand brushing his arm occasionally for reassurance. The Velari guards parted respectfully, bowing slightly, but the air felt heavy, charged with anticipation. Everyone knew that the queen would appear soon. And then she did. Queen Velora entered the hall like a storm wrapped in gold. Her armor shimmered with a strange inner light, and her eyes, golden and piercing, scanned the room with a presence that demanded attention. The crowd fell silent, their whispers stopping in midair. Even the soldiers who had seen countless battles seemed to hold their breath. Lysiara froze. Ethan froze. The queen's gaze swept over them like a tidal wave, first softening slightly when it reached her daughter, then sharpening as it landed on him. "You," she said. Her voice was calm, but it carried a power that made Ethan instinctively straighten his posture. "Step forward." Ethan swallowed. Every muscle in his body felt tense. He had fought enemies before, but nothing prepared him for the presence of this queen. She did not just command attention, she owned it. And now, she was looking at him, the human who had crossed her people's boundaries. The one who had saved her daughter from death itself. He stepped forward cautiously, hands slightly raised to show he meant no harm. His armor was scratched, his face streaked with soot and blood, but he stood tall. That was all he could do. Queen Velora's golden eyes studied him closely, moving slowly over his face, his body, his hands. Ethan felt like she could see through him, every fear, every scar, every ounce of determination. You carried my daughter from the fire, the queen said softly, almost to herself. You faced enemies alone, without hesitation, and without regard for your own life. I did what I had to, Ethan said quietly. His voice shook slightly, but he kept his eyes on hers. She needed help. That's all that mattered. Her gaze sharpened. Most would flee. Most would leave her to die. But you stayed. You fought. You endured. Why? Ethan hesitated. He had no grand speech ready. He only had the truth. Because she was alive. And I couldn't just let her die. A silence fell over the hall. Even the guards seemed to hold their breath. The queen's eyes softened slightly, just enough for Ethan to sense something human in her. Something warmer than authority. Something like understanding. You risked yourself for someone not your own, she said finally. You are unusual, courageous, and yet reckless. Her lips curved in the faintest of smiles. Humans are strange beings. Ethan allowed himself a small smile. We're not all bad, he said. Some of us just care. Her eyes widened slightly, the light in them shifting from gold to something almost gentle. You speak plainly, and with heart. That is rare among your kind. She stepped closer, and Ethan felt a heat that had nothing to do with the sun outside. She was imposing, yet strangely magnetic. You saved my blood, she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. And for that, you will have your place. Under my protection, under my house. Ethan blinked. He did not understand. My place? The queen's gaze did not waver. Yes, you risked your life for royalty of a race not your own. That act cannot go unnoticed. You will not be sent away. You will remain here, where I can ensure no harm comes to you. And to my daughter. Lysiara looked up at him, eyes wide, lips parted. You don't have to. She started, but the queen's hand on her shoulder silenced her. Ethan shook his head, still unsure of what to say. He had survived countless battles, but he had never felt like this before. An outsider, suddenly accepted, even claimed. The weight of the queen's words pressed on him, heavy, but not unwelcome. Queen Velora tilted her head slightly. Do not speak yet. Let the universe see that a human has earned his place among us. Let this be remembered, human. You are under my protection now. Ethan nodded slowly, still catching his breath. The queen's gaze softened once more, just a fraction. And in that moment, he realized the truth. He had saved the princess. And in doing so, he had changed his own fate forever. And though he did not yet understand everything that this meant, he knew one thing clearly. He would stand beside her, and he would survive. Because now he had a reason greater than himself. The palace was unlike anything he had ever seen. Crystal walls shimmered with colors he could not name, and soft light floated in the air as if the very air itself was alive. The corridors were wide and endless, filled with Velari guards moving silently, their armor reflecting the glow. Every step he took echoed softly, reminding him of how far he had come from a battlefield filled with smoke and fire to a palace of wonder and power. Princess Lysiara walked beside him, her small hand occasionally brushing his arm. She still looked fragile, but her eyes now held something stronger: trust, and a spark of hope. She had survived the fire, and in Ethan, she had found safety unlike anything she had ever known. You must rest, she said softly as they reached a room filled with cushions and gentle light. The queen will want to speak with you later, but please sit. Ethan sank onto a cushion, his body heavy with exhaustion. His arm throbbed, his muscles ached, and every inch of him screamed to rest. But even as he closed his eyes briefly, he felt the weight of the queen's words still pressing on him. Under her protection. Claimed. It was an honor unlike anything he had imagined, but it was also a responsibility heavier than his armor. Lysiara knelt beside him. You don't have to pretend to be strong here, she said quietly. I know what you've done. And I know what you've been through. Her silver eyes glimmered with tears she did not shed. You saved me. You really saved me. Ethan managed a weak smile. I just did what anyone should do. I just didn't stop. No, she said, shaking her head. Not anyone. You stayed when you could have left. You fought when you could have run. Her voice faltered, but the emotion behind it was clear. You're different. He looked at her, surprised at the depth of her words. Humans rarely received such praise, and yet here it was, from someone whose life he had literally saved. And for the first time, he allowed himself to feel proud. Not arrogant, not boastful, just proud. He had made a difference. He had mattered. Before he could respond, a soft chime echoed through the room. The door opened, and Queen Velora entered. Her golden eyes held the same piercing power as before, but now there was a softness, a quiet acknowledgement in her gaze. "You have endured much," she said, her voice calm yet filled with authority. "You carry wounds that run deeper than the body. But still you stand." "I'm alive," Ethan said simply, though he struggled to stand tall. "Thanks to the princess, I just did what I had to." The queen stepped closer, her gaze examining him as though she could see every thought and scar. "You speak truthfully. That is rare. Many claim bravery, but few show it in the way you have. Courage like yours is worth more than gold, more than titles, more than life itself." Ethan's heart thudded. He had been claimed, honored, recognized, but not because of rank or status, only because of what he had done. The weight of that recognition was almost dizzying, but not frightening. It was grounding. The queen reached out, placing her hand lightly on his shoulder. The touch was firm, yet not harsh. "You will stay here. You will walk among us. And you will do so not as a servant, not as a soldier, but as someone who has earned a place in our house, under my protection, and that of my daughter." Lysiara's hand found his again, gripping tightly. "See," she said softly. "You belong here now." Ethan exhaled slowly. He had never imagined belonging like this. Humans often wandered, fought alone, survived alone, but now, for the first time, he felt a tether, a reason to stay. A place where he mattered. As the queen left, she spoke one final line. Low but powerful. "Do not disappoint us, human. You have been given a rare gift, the chance to be more than what your kind has been. Choose wisely." Ethan watched her leave, then looked at Lysiara. "I don't know if I deserve any of this," he admitted quietly. "But I'll try. I'll do my best." Her silver eyes glimmered with hope. "That's all anyone could ever ask of you," she said, smiling faintly. For the first time in days, Ethan felt a sense of peace. The battlefield was behind him. The princess was safe. And now, surrounded by a palace of light and the trust of a people he barely knew, he realized that survival was no longer enough. He had a new purpose: to protect, to belong, to stand beside those who mattered, no matter the cost. And in that quiet, shining room, Ethan Hayes understood that his life had changed forever. Not just because he had saved a princess, but because in doing so, he had found a reason to fight for more than survival. He had found a reason to fight for something greater than himself. The next morning, the palace corridors felt colder than Ethan expected. Crystal walls reflected sunlight like liquid fire, and guards moved silently, eyes flicking toward him. Whispers followed his steps. Some admired him, some were curious, others clearly suspicious. Humans were rare here. Humans were unpredictable. And now, this human had been claimed by the queen herself. Ethan felt the weight of the palace on his shoulders. He had survived battlefields, smoke, and death, but navigating a royal court felt like stepping onto a different kind of war zone. Every glance, every word, every movement carried meaning. And yet, he could not forget why he was here. Princess Lysiara. She walked beside him, her hand occasionally brushing his arm. Silent reassurance in a world that expected him to be an outsider. The queen had summoned him to the throne hall. Ethan walked slowly, trying to steady his breath and his nerves. Guards bowed slightly, parting the way. Courtiers whispered, some staring openly, others hiding their expressions behind fans and robes. He felt their judgment. He felt their curiosity. And he felt something else: expectation. When he entered the hall, the queen was waiting. Her golden eyes did not soften this time. They burned with authority, radiating power that made Ethan's chest tighten. The room was filled with nobles and generals, all standing silently. The air was heavy with anticipation, and for a moment, Ethan wondered if they expected him to bow, kneel, or flee. "You," Queen Velora said, her voice ringing like a bell. "Step forward." Ethan obeyed, taking a careful step toward the throne. He kept his gaze steady, though his heart pounded in his chest. The queen's eyes studied him, slow and precise, as if weighing his soul against a scale only she could see. "You carried my daughter from the fire," she said. Her tone calm, yet every word echoed across the hall. "You faced our enemies alone. You survived when most would have perished. And for that, you will be recognized." Murmurs ran through the room. The nobles exchanged glances. Some frowned, some whispered, but none dared interrupt. The queen extended a hand toward him. "By the authority of the Valari throne, by the protection of my house, and by the life you preserved, I claim you." The hall fell silent. Ethan froze. The words were clear, undeniable. He had been claimed, not as a prisoner, not as a servant, but as someone protected, someone honored, someone bound to the queen's family. Claimed? He whispered, unsure if he had heard correctly. "You are under my protection," the queen said, her golden eyes locking on his. "No one human or Valari may harm you. You will remain here, walk among us, and be recognized for the courage you have shown." Princess Lysiara stepped forward, her eyes wide and shining. "You see?" she said softly, as if she could read his thoughts. "You belong here now." Ethan exhaled slowly. He had survived war, fire, and enemies, but the weight of recognition, the weight of responsibility, was heavier than any armor he had worn. He felt awe, fear, pride, and gratitude all at once. And yet, beneath it all, there was something steady, a quiet certainty that he would do whatever it took to live up to this moment. The queen's gaze softened slightly, just a fraction. "You did not choose this path," she said. "But in choosing to save my daughter, you have chosen your place among us. You are not just a soldier. You are a symbol. A reminder that courage knows no species, no borders, no limits." Ethan's hands clenched at his sides. Words failed him. He had never imagined being honored like this, recognized like this, trusted like this. And yet, he felt it in every heartbeat, in every breath, the realization that he had changed not just Lysiara's fate, but the fate of everyone in the room. The queen's voice rang again, firmer this time. "Let all who doubt the strength of humans see this day. Let all who forget that bravery can come from the smallest of beings remember this moment. Ethan Hayes, human, you are claimed. Your place is here, and your loyalty will be your own, but your protection is mine." A wave of murmurs and whispers swept through the hall, but Ethan stood still, his eyes locked on the queen. Princess Lysiara's hand found his again, gripping tightly, grounding him. He did not fully understand what the future held, but he knew one thing with certainty: he would stand. He would protect. And he would honor the trust given to him. For the first time, Ethan felt that being human, far from home, far from familiarity, meant more than survival. It meant courage, recognition, and belonging. And in that moment, with the queen's eyes on him, the princess beside him, and the palace filled with whispers of awe, he understood that his life had changed forever. He was no longer just a soldier. He was part of something greater, and he would never forget it. The sky was full of smoke when Ethan Hayes opened his eyes again. He lay on broken ground, his armor cracked, his body hurting everywhere. The battlefield around him was silent now, but not the peaceful kind of silence. It was the silence that came after death. Burned ships lay scattered across the valley like fallen giants. Sparks jumped from broken wires. The air smelled of dust, fire, and fear. Ethan pushed himself up slowly. His arm was bleeding, but he did not stop. He remembered why he was here. The royal convoy had been attacked, and the alien princess was missing somewhere in this wreck. His team was gone, scattered or dead, but he was still alive. And if he was alive, he could search. That was what humans did. They kept going, even when everything hurt. He walked through the wreckage, stepping over metal pieces and fallen soldiers. The Valari bodies lay still, their pale blue skin turning cold. Ethan felt a heavy weight in his chest. He did not know them, but he respected them. They died protecting someone important. Someone young. Someone who was now alone. He called out into the smoke. "Princess Lysiara, can you hear me?" His voice echoed weakly. No answer came back. For a moment, Ethan feared the worst. But he forced himself to keep searching. He checked broken transports, pushed aside fallen panels, and listened carefully for any sound. Then he heard it, a soft, weak cry. So quiet that he almost missed it. He turned sharply. "Hello, where are you?" Another small voice came, trembling. "Help, please." Ethan rushed toward the sound. A large transport lay crushed under heavy metal beams. One side was completely destroyed, but the other side still had a small opening. Ethan looked inside and froze. There she was. Princess Lysiara lay trapped under a bent piece of silver plating. Her glowing dress was torn, her silver-white hair covered in dust, and her breathing shallow. Her eyes, beautiful and shining like moonlight, opened just a little when she saw him. She whispered, "You're human." Her voice was so soft that Ethan felt it in his heart. He knelt beside her and gently brushed the metal off her arm. "Yes," he said, keeping his voice calm. "But don't be afraid. I'm here to help you." Her eyes filled with confusion and fear. Velari and humans rarely spoke to each other. They were not enemies, but they were not friends. Yet Ethan's hands were gentle, not rough. His face looked tired, not threatening. "Please," she whispered again, I can't move. I'll get you out. Just stay with me." Ethan pushed the heavy metal piece with all his strength. His arm screamed with pain, but he did not stop. Slowly, inch by inch, he lifted it high enough to pull her free. Then he lifted her in his arms. She felt light, fragile, as if the smallest movement could break her. She looked up at him, scared. "Will we survive?" Ethan tightened his grip protectively. "I'll make sure you do." He stepped out of the transport and began walking quickly. But before he could go far, he heard something that made his blood run cold, a sharp metallic clicking sound in the distance. Enemy hunters. They had not left yet. And they were close. Princess Lysiara's fingers as armor. "They're coming." "I know," Ethan said. "I won't let them take you." His legs moved faster. He ran through smoke, over broken ground, holding her close to his chest to shield her from falling debris. Each breath burned in his throat, but he kept going. She felt his heartbeat, strong and steady, and for the first time in her life, she trusted a human. The clicking grew louder. Ethan slid behind a broken wall, breathing hard. He checked the princess again. Her eyes were half open, weak. She looked at him like he was her last hope. "You're safe with me," he whispered. She tried to speak but could only nod. Ethan looked into the smoke-filled battlefield, listening for the hunters. They were coming. He had no backup, no weapons left, no plan, but he had her, and he would not let anything take her away. Not while he was still standing. Ethan could hear them now. The hunters moving through the smoke. Their claws scraped metal, and the ground shook under their heavy steps. He glanced down at Princess Lysiara, whose small body trembled in his arms. Her silver eyes, wide with fear, searched his face for reassurance. He forced a small smile. "I've got you," he said. "Just stay close, and don't look away." She nodded weakly, gripping his armor. Ethan felt a surge of determination. He would not let her die, not after everything. Not when he was still breathing. Not when he had promised. The first hunter appeared suddenly, stepping from behind a twisted vehicle. Its glowing eyes locked on them, and it let out a screech that made Ethan's heart race. Without thinking, he raised his arm and swung the metal debris at it. The hunter screeched again, falling back, but more were coming. "Keep moving," Ethan urged. He ran through the wreckage, leaping over shattered metal and broken vehicles. Each step pounded against his exhausted body, but he ignored the pain. The princess's life was more important than his own. "Why?" "Are you helping me?" Lysiara asked, her voice trembling. Ethan looked down at her. For a moment, he almost laughed at the question. In her world, humans were considered reckless and savage, yet here he was risking his life for her. "Maybe someone should," he said simply. "Maybe it's time someone tried." Her eyes softened, glimmering with something she had never felt before: trust. "No one has ever cared for a Velari like this," she whispered. "I care," Ethan said, keeping his voice firm, even though his lungs burned. "And right now, that's enough." A second hunter jumped from the shadows, swinging its claw at him. Ethan blocked it with his free arm, shoving it away. But the effort made him stumble, and Lysiara clutched him tighter. He gritted his teeth, fighting the pain in his broken arm. Each strike from the hunters tested his strength, but he refused to fall. He would carry her to safety, even if it killed him. They reached a small ridge. Ethan ducked behind it, breathing heavily. The hunters paused, scanning the area. The princess looked at him, her fear mirrored in his own reflection of exhaustion. "Will they follow us?" she asked. "They will," he admitted. "But we can make it. We just have to move when they least expect it." Minutes passed. The hunter's glowing eyes searched the ground, but Ethan stayed still, holding Lysiara close. He could feel her heartbeat, weak but alive, against his chest. It reminded him why he could not fail. Suddenly, the hunters turned and started to move away. Ethan waited until they were far enough, then took a deep breath. "Okay, princess. We move now. Stay with me." He ran down the ridge, careful not to make too much noise. His legs burned with every step, but he pushed forward. They reached a shallow river that reflected the dying light of the sun. Ethan's strength was almost gone, but he crossed it without letting her feet touch the water. He carried her like she was the most precious thing in the world, because she was. When they reached the far side, a shadow fell over them. More hunters appeared. Ethan froze for a second, calculating. Then he smiled faintly. Guess we have to fight again. He set Lysiara down behind a large rock, shielding her from view. She shook, whispering, "You don't have to." "I do," he said. "If I don't, you die. And I promised you wouldn't." Ethan fought like he never had before. Each movement was precise, though his body ached. He ducked, twisted, and swung anything he could reach. He was a human, and humans were stubborn, relentless, impossible to stop when they believed in something. Finally, the hunters fell one by one. Ethan collapsed to his knees, chest heaving. The princess ran to him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "You saved me," she whispered, tears streaking her face. "I'm still breathing," he said, smiling weakly. "So we're fine." For a long moment, they stayed like that, holding onto each other amidst the smoke and broken metal. Ethan looked into her eyes and saw relief, fear, and gratitude all at once. And in that moment, he realized something: he would face anything. Fight anything, survive anything, just to protect her, because in a universe so vast, so dangerous, some things were worth every scar, every pain, every risk. And she was one of them. The glowing ships appeared on the horizon as the sun dipped behind jagged mountains. Ethan carried Princess Lysiara through the final stretch of the valley, each step slower than the last. His body screamed with pain, his armor heavy with blood and sweat, but he could feel her small hands holding onto him tightly. She trusted him completely, and that trust burned in his chest like fire. He could not fail her now. When they reached the landing area, Velari soldiers poured out of the ships. Their silver-blue armor glinted in the fading sunlight, and their eyes widened as they saw the human carrying their princess. For a moment, the crowd froze, unsure of what to do. Humans were outsiders. They were unpredictable. But here was one wounded, tired, bleeding, and yet alive, holding their heir in his arms. "Lysiara!" A voice called out. The princess's personal guards rushed forward, moving faster than Ethan had ever seen. Their faces were filled with fear, relief, and disbelief. Lysiara's own body stiffened, but she did not let go of Ethan. Ethan knelt down carefully and lowered her to the ground, keeping his hands around her shoulders. "You're safe now," he whispered. Her eyes were still wide, shining with unshed tears. She looked at him, the weight of everything they had survived reflected in her gaze. The soldiers surrounded them, but none dared speak at first. Finally, one stepped forward. "Princess, you are safe," he said, voice trembling. "Thanks to him?" He gestured toward Ethan. "Yes," Lysiara said softly, barely above a whisper. "He saved me."